Sure.
Going okay. That you make a quick mix of the piece. You melt all this stuff down into one coherent thing you can take home and kind of listen and see what you like to do with it. The first mix is invariably the best, the one you keep. For some reason, I think it has to, especially if you're an artist that really depends on intuition and you've learned to trust the wisdom of the heart, as Henry Miller said. There's a lot of unconscious processes going when you do a fast mix. You're not editing, you're not thinking about it. You go right for the jugular. Maybe this is the one that's going to stay, I don't know. I'm not nuts about getting into the big technical thing, but if anyone is really curious about what the instruments are making those noises, I don't mind telling them. So, however, I have to find out what they are. I had to jot this down quickly this morning. Well, essentially, the principal instrumentation is a synclavier tube, playing the gypsy violin melody, the low violas, the chorale drone, and the bass sound. The Fairlight is doing the female voices, which just started to come in. Matrix 12 by Oberheim is doing the middle string like choirs. And Oberheim OBX8 is doing the boom bass. And as is usually the case, regardless what the stuff is that you use to make the sounds, my preoccupation is what you do with the sounds once it's there. I use an awful lot of so-called outboard equipment, harmonizers and reverberation and delay boxes, and I use them in ways that are not industry standard. I use them the way they can be used, but no one does it. And it gives a kind of unique edge to music that otherwise you hear all the time on top of the radio. I'm using exactly the same equipment, but using it in a curious way. I'm not pushing it around. I'm not damaging anything. I mean, after all, it is only circuitry. Nothing is going to happen. But that's where a lot of my composing is really done, is with that equipment that treats the sounds after the fact. Although I must admit, in this particular instance, I was playing, how can I put it, all the sounds you hear on the tape, I was playing to exactly those sounds, but they weren't going on tape. Does that make sense? I made it sound like that after I performed it, but I knew what I wanted it to sound like because I played it while it sounded that way. Very silly. Well, what can I say? What next? What do you want to do? Yes, sir.
So do you often compose in the studio as you're going along on a piece?
Absolutely.
Just kind of realize it as you produce?
That's right. The recording and the compositional process and the recording process are one and the same.
How did you manage to originally get into the kind of facilities to get that kind of...
That is a very good question. And I can tell you that it's getting easier to do that. Because number one, the equipment is getting better. It's getting less expensive. Doesn't mean that it's cheap. And there's more of it. It's not a mysterious thing anymore. It's all over the place, especially in a large entertainment complex city like we live in. It's everywhere. And you don't need 24 tracks. You can do it on stereo just as well. I've heard great music done purposely on stereo, even though there were 24 tracks available. Why not? It has to do with the person who's using the machine, not what the machinery is. And in fact, I think it's also a good idea to use what is available. I've gone into studios thinking, well, what I'm going to do is thus and such. And I get there and thus and such isn't really there. They've got something else instead. Or they just rented it out. Well, it's nonsense to simply say, well, I just can't work this way. Of course you can work that way. You can work with exactly what's there, always. And never be embarrassed about what it is. I use my son's guitar reverb box. And it's if you just know what its limitations are, it's every bit as good as a $12,000 lexicon. Why not? Use it. You don't have to tell anyone you're using it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was curious, do you have a different approach when you compose a piece intended for environmental purposes than when you intended for concentrated listening?
Well, likewise, a good question. But I can tell you that none of my pieces are really meant as environmental pieces alone. I mean them to be listening pieces. So I don't think of it in terms of, I guess you're alluding to, quote, ambient music, whatever that is. No, I never think of it in those terms. So there is no different process. It's always the same one.
You had stated that you use machinery much different than the usual way. How so?
Well, now, for example, okay, let's start once again with when I'm talking about industry standards. All of this stuff that you are going to be using, if you haven't already, and I'm sure you will, is a result of rock and roll music. Period. And there are certain ways that's supposed to sound. It has nothing to do with style. I'm not talking about the language, but I'm talking about the signal that goes onto the tape that comes through your FM radio. It's always in a state of flux. It's always changing. There's no question about that. But what many of these instruments can do, particularly when they're coupled with others, is they are there, but that wasn't the primary design purpose for them being there. They are there for other reasons. And we have to go on a one-to-one basis. Well, this means this, and this means this, and there's 100,000 things to talk about suddenly. It just means that I'm using the potential for some of these things in a way that wasn't originally meant to be. Now, for example, I use much more reverberation than would possibly pass muster on the top 40 radio station, because it's not going to go platinum anyway, so there's no worry. For example, I used 70-second reverberation delay on a Lexicon 224, and when I did the mix, I added an additional 10.5 seconds reverb. They have almost a minute and a half of sound hanging over, which means that when you do the mix, a lot of that sound gets in the way. You're continually pulling it down, bringing it up, so that there's as much performance on the board as there is in making the notes that make the piece. You perform a version, a mix, in other words. Very, very aggravating sometimes.
When you say that your compositional process and recording process are one and the same, does that mean a lot of that, what we heard, was improvised, or
Yes.
Is there any score?
No, there is no score. No.
You ever make a score?
No, never. No. There's really no need, because it couldn't be duplicated anyway, even by me, so. Yes.
Well, in that vein, when you go into the studio, do you think to yourself, I want this sort of a sound, or do you just sort of experiment?
Well, a little of both. There's nothing strange about that. It would be the same way you did. But if there's a particular project or task that I'm interested in doing, I've usually kind of messed around a little bit beforehand anyway, so I have a pretty good handle on what direction I want to go. I have gone into the studio absolutely cold, have the faintest idea what is going to happen. It's expensive, isn't it? It's an extremely expensive way to compose music, I can tell you. It's yeah. In fact, I brought along a tape of works that Brian Eno and I did, which have never been recorded, probably never will be. But they were a result of absolutely not having the faintest idea what to do that day. And suddenly, something rings your bell and you go with it. Let me put that on, okay? I haven't heard this in a while. I'm trying to Great. I did bring something that I wanted to. here is now here's some work I did. Getting directly to that point you asked about it's getting expensive and all that stuff. Here is some work that I did not terribly long ago, just within the last 6 weeks, with a band that I'm very interested in. It's just two guys. It's Repetition. And Ruben Garcia and Steve Caton. They live in Whittier. And there's a small, they found a small stereo studio for, I don't know, $25 an hour, I suppose, which seems very reasonable to me. And they did have they had one, like, pretty good reverberation machine. And the guitarist had his own, and so I patched them into one another so that each affects the other one. And so the sounds here, well, as you can tell, are going to be just guitar and piano, but the piano sound is the one that really interested me, because what I did was I put the treatments of the piano, the way it's echoing, and re-echoing from the echo, this kind of round robin sound, on one channel, and the piano straight, dry, on the other channel. And then when I recorded it, I just took the dry piano, that is to say the way you're supposed to do it, that's the sound you want. I just took that off so you can't hear it. All you hear is the result of what the piano was doing. And the guy that's playing the piano, that's all he's hearing too. Of course, he can hear residually what he's doing at the piano. Of course, he's sitting there. But by and large, what he's getting through the headset while he's playing is this odd treatment of the piano. And then the guitar goes straight on, dry, with just a little standard anti-club reverberation. This isn't the kind of music they do at all. And something, they were as surprised as I was. And that's super when that happens. I'm affected by the way musics that are totally different from mine as well. And I think that's the way it should be. This is what they do, more or less. Well, that's music I can certainly relate to, but it's I like all the diverse backgrounds that interesting musicians and composers come from. This is just a hell of a thrill, period. Ruben Garcia, for example, is from The Plugs, the old group with Tito Lavaria. And Steve Caton is guitarist with Black Flag and X. all kinds of things. They decided at some point that they were interested in art music rather than dirty club rock and roll. And they have a long way. I mean, this is going to be difficult, but God help them.
Could you say something about your relationship with Eno and get together with him and collaborate?
Yeah, and Daniel and Juan.
And Daniel N. Moss? Well, first of all, that happened in 1976 when he had called me at home from London and told me that he had just heard a tape of mine. It was Madrigals of the Rose Angel. And he asked, more or less said, is that the kind of music you do? I said, yes, it is. And he said, do you have more like it? I said, yeah, sure. Would you want to come to London and record? I said, I'll certainly think about it. I said, yeah, of course I will. That's the way it happened. I have no idea what. I mean, it's just one of those things.
How do you two work together in the same way then, like when you're
Well,
project?
that's, well, after we initially got together, my first album on a like a big label was the Pavilion of Dreams. And Eno was the producer on that. And after working on that, we just got along so well, and we almost agreed on everything: politics, music, art, food, and it just seemed so apparent that we would get together and begin working. You see, the important thing about collaboration is that, which I had alluded to earlier, is that at its best you come up with something that neither one of the collaborators would have done left of themselves. You come up with something utterly unique that's the result of these two people, or three, however many. So the first out-and-out collaboration was, of course, the Plateaus of Mirror. And that was recorded various times in various places. It was recorded partly in London, partly in New York, partly here in Los Angeles. And a lot of the decisions were made by telephone calls and numerous letters. Finally, an album kind of suggested itself after an awful lot of work and a lot of travel. So, The Pearl, on the other hand, was done in about 2.5 weeks, marathon every day. I think 18 days, 10-hour days, exhausting.
Is there any particular project between the two of you that is outstanding in your mind that you particularly like more than the other?
No, well, there are various pieces that I like better than others, but no, I wouldn't characterize it in any other way. Because, look, I changed my mind anyway as soon as I left. I'd be telling a lie. Well, look, I'll just put on something else, I guess. Here. This is about 2.5 minutes. Pardon? Rocco, yeah. Well, that was real early on. I mean, that's circa 1962 or so, I guess. And it was an important thing at one time. Yes, that's absolutely true. But I feel like, I'll be honest with you, I feel like it was a different person. I'm at that dangerous age where I can actually look back many, many years and see that I was grown up adult then too. So, but I change my mind all the time about it. But the idea with Rothko was that I had come across his paintings for the first time, and it just seemed so apparent to me that, well, at the time I said in my usual enthusiasm, I wanted to make music like he makes paintings. And the way you do that is take out all the baggage and throw it away and just start from square one. I felt like I was going to have an interesting career as a composer, and it was starting today. Everything that happened previously was nonsense. It's very liberating. Well, here's a little 2.5-minute piano piece, I think I put this on to the female voice sound on it. I think this is the one. I'm not sure. Let's pretend. Female voice sound on it isn't there. It's not. There's no instrument making choir sound. It's all a result of the harmonics from the piano. For 6 months now. My oldest child says, "Dad, things aren't that bad, are they?" Yeah.
How do you do when you do callbacks? Do you feel there's a sense of that? Do you want that?
Well, I certainly feel there is a sense of that, and with it, look, I can't compartmentalize it. I mean, sometimes there are obvious, what do you want to call them, cadence points, I guess, that come up, which is a little difficult to pull off, especially when you don't have any chord changes. But there are emotional peaks and eddies. Yes, absolutely, of course. And it's not a matter of wanting it. I mean, that's what comes. That's what comes out. And if I keep it, it means that I like what I hear. It's very simple.
You consciously, so you don't consciously block it?
No, absolutely not. No. No, I must say that I only consciously go after what is, I'm continually surprised. That really is, I think, the way that I work. I'm continually surprised. Oh, yeah, sure. But erasing a tape is absolute. Then it's gone forever. Disappointed, sure, yeah, but if you're disappointed in the musical part of it, then everyone is. That's, normal. Sure. You can't be in love with every aspect of your creative life. Otherwise, there'd be no time to be a human. Therefore, no creation, no art. So, yes, either one.
Oh, is there any reason why you, maybe acoustical reasons why you use the note E a lot?
I didn't know I did.
Oh, okay. I just noticed that.
Now I see you've got me so self-conscious. I said I'm using this note a lot. I have to drop it from my
Is there any difference in the thinking process when you work on a tape piece or a synthesized piece as in comparison to a piece with live performers or live instruments?
Well, yes. I mean, absolutely the world of difference. I've sort of pulled back from the live performance thing, and in fact, I've totally eschewed the idea of music being played from a score in parts. I absolutely don't do that at all, and haven't for really years. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not. That's not where I feel most comfortable. And yes, there's certainly a world of difference. Absolutely. For one thing, I think that working the way I do, you're ultimately responsible for many more things. Ostensibly, you're in control of everything. Of course, it's a lie. It's absolute nonsense. You're not at all. I mean, you're swimming and fishing as much as, you're as scared to death as anyone else. You don't know what's going to happen. You hope, you try, you work hard at it. But with live performance, there's two aspects of it. I mean, I do occasionally do solo piano concerts, but it's more or less like sitting in my living room. And if it's a good piano, I have a wonderful time. I sit there and drift away. I'm gone. And I assume everyone else is too. I don't know. I don't have any plan at all. I had a very good friend in Austria. He's a German composer named Rodelius, who gives solo piano concerts, and he refuses to acknowledge applause for his concert. He says, I'm not responsible for this. I sit here and it comes from somewhere, and I just go ahead and do it. I don't know what's going to happen next. I think it's a very nice attitude. It's a little bit, mystical for me, but it's a lovely, lovely frame of mind to put yourself in. The thing about an improvising artist, it doesn't make any difference going on tape or not, and you're using $250,000 worth of equipment. You're always at ground zero. Always. I mean, it's right on the edge. And the creative tension is really horrendous at times. I guess that's a method of working. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Tell us something about love using piano, selective chord.
Yes, I'd like to. Yes, I remember that. That's from the old days. That's the old avant-garde days, isn't it?
Sounds pretty far.
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, basically, you're very kind to ask, and I'm loath to say anything about these pieces, but what it basically is that it's a piece for solo piano, and essentially what you do is play a chord as quietly as possible, and if you get all the notes right, you've played it too loud. Yes, and so you must try again, softly. And if you miss any of the notes, you've got to let all the sound die and try again for as long a duration as you possibly can. And then just kind of my cheekiness at the time, I said, look, if you can't think of a chord, just call me up and I'll tell you.
Do you know who has his phone number now?
Pardon?
Do you know who has his phone number now?
No, you know, no, it's really going to be interesting. That's a phone number from 20 years ago. Somebody in Silver Lake is getting a lot of calls.
You get a lot of calls when it came out.
Honestly, I can't remember. I know I did get some. In fact, I got one that was, they had made, it was from Lucas Fossimo. And they had made the asking the composer on the telephone part of the performance. You know, the telephone was on stage back in Buffalo, I think it was. And they called, is Harold Butler? Pardon? Oh, believe me, they knew.
They had an answering machine.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? Leave a message on the machine. D flat major. That's beautiful. The electronic age, of course, that's the way we do it. That's very good. I'm really jealous. I wish I had thought of it.
Do you have a copy of it?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a copy of it?
Yes, I have met the Cocteau twins. Great. I met them backstage at the Palace in Hollywood. And in fact, they called me this week, or their manager did anyway. And they're an English rock group, and I'm going to do a video and an album with them in the spring in London. And I love their music. I absolutely think it's fabulous. And, well, yeah, I got on real good. They're very nice. And I can't think else to do.
Any other questions? Do you have any takes here of your instrumental composition?
Composition?
You know, instrumental live performances.
No, I don't. The last instrumental.
Great city.
No. The last ones were the pieces that I wrote from 1972 to 1974, 6. I can't remember. Anyway, the Pavilion of Dreams. And after that, I rather left the idea of note music altogether.
I'd be curious to hear what you were before the tape days.
I think you find it very similar. Yeah. At least the mood and the texture is exactly the same, except the what's making the sound is more. I mean, I did a lot of pieces for female voice and harps and gongs and celestes and bells of all kinds, as glittery a sound as possible. It just enchanted me, and I still am entranced with that sound. But at the time, I was teaching in the college, of course, and you have, as you composers well know, you have slave labor, right, in your own department.
Some of them broke their chains last night.
I mean, you actually do have ensembles and friends who play, you know, who are very good players. I mean, that's a normal social situation in any music school. But when I left teaching, that was, I mean, it was goodbye to all that forever. So, I mean, if you're going to leave one thing, might as well unload the whole ship.
That's a good question about your recording process again.
Yes.
Obviously, reverb is a big part of the composition process in the studio. Now, when you record something to the piano track, do you lay down the track with reverb on it already, and then reverberate it again as it comes out?
Either way, I think that the easiest way is to have a separate track of the reverb, but then to listen to the reverb as you're playing, if you're concerned about what it's going to sound like ultimately.
So this is the final mix. You still could make it dry.
Yes, you could. Yes, sure. Now, I don't necessarily do that as a rule of thumb, because in the mixing process, there's so much to be concerned about if you're using a lot of tracks. But with just less than 4 tracks, why that is certainly no problem. But look, if you've already got an idea that it works, that it sounds the way it's supposed to sound, well, you might as well free up one of those tracks for something else if you need it. And you can go directly on. Sure. No one knows anything. And then you'll forget later on also. You can never, ever get the same treatment twice. Never. That's another thing that's always fascinated me about the creative process generally. Certainly not with composition alone. Let us say you do a work. You are working on a thing, and it's what would that piece be like if you had started 5 minutes earlier, or you let procrastination take over? You didn't start until the next day. You would obviously come up with something, maybe even radically different. That always fascinates me.
Yeah.
And I think it has something to do with the fact also that working, as I said, from that square one, ground zero all the time, you're always amazed at this idea about being continually surprised. You would be at any other time as well, obviously, but the specifics would be altered immeasurably. Such a lovely idea. I mean, it's a nicer idea than actually going and making the music.
Very often. Can I ask you a question? You go in the studio and you make a piece, I see something that kind of germinated that night, and there you have it on the set. What do you do with it then? Do you bring it home and play it for your friends, or do you sell it at Capitol?
Oh, I see. No, I certainly play it for my friends. I play it for myself a lot, an awful lot, especially if I like it. This last one, for example, I can't get it out of my head. Now, it may just seem like, oh, well, another Harold Budd piece to everybody else, but to me, there's something there. And I'm almost afraid to go back in and do another version of it, because it's not going to be the same. And I'm just sorry it's only 2.5 minutes long. On the other hand, maybe that's as long as it should be. If it's any longer, then I'm whistling Dixie. Not true.
I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you make most of your living as a composer from recordings that you sell, or
Yes.
do you ever give any tape concerts or things of that sort?
Tape concerts?
Yeah, I mean, I know you get installation at New Music America, which is this continuous tape music, isn't it? It's curious the other ways that you present your music.
Well, this is all brand new for me. I'm this business about doing installations, and I like it a lot. And I think I'm going to travel with that one, or at least I'm going to have the show travel. Yeah, I like that idea a lot. It's very simple to do. It doesn't take a great deal of logistical planning on my part. But by and large, no. I guess I'm a composer, but it's the recordings that are my primary interest and concern. Sure. Yeah. I like recorded music, commercially recorded music, for several reasons. One of the quality tends to be extremely good. The distribution is very good. I mean, a lot of people here are introduced to a lot of interesting people. You meet a lot of people who somehow, you touch them in a strange way. It's, it's fabulous, like being a priest almost somehow. And, the other thing is that when a piece is recorded, commercially available, in a certain sense, it's no longer yours anymore. It belongs to the person who just purchased it. And I like that idea, because you have the option then of not being confined in a space listening to something. You're going through a social situation. You can't get up now and leave, even though you test everything that's going on. With a recording, you can listen to as little or as much as you want without any interference from anyone. I mean, it is the most democratic medium possible, even more so than video, because video, you're always searching. With records, you're just, it's so simple and inexpensive. I like that very much.
Just two coinciding questions. You just brought this up. Seeing that you don't have scores,
Yes.
how do you deal with copyright of your
Very astute question. Great, I'm glad you asked that. And it's very simple. The copyright laws were changed as of January 1980. And they're much, much different than they were. All the horror stories of Martin Sabatnik having to make scores of his electronic things. Utter nonsense, of course. I mean, always the society is way ahead of the institutions that it's supposed to protect and obviously. So, it comes down to two things. Let's say it's commercially recorded. You get copyright as the composer, just like you always did, but all you have to do is submit the recording. And then you have copyright of that particular performance, the one that's pressed on record, or the one that you have on tape that you're sending out to people and doing, whatever is happening to it. So it's a double thing. It's still the same standard C with a circle in it. That protects you as the composer. You own this piece with this title. Always will. Well, at least for 50 years you will. And then the performance of it, the one you send out on some mechanical thing, is a P with a circle, which protects that tape that you have or that recording that you have. So it's absolutely no problem. It doesn't have to be scored at all. They had to liberalize it because it was utterly unworkable the way it was before.
The next question is, your music tends, at least for me, sort of tends towards visual things. Have you ever thought about scoring videos or scoring movies or something like that?
Well, in point of fact, a lot of my music is used for just that purpose. And but I have never done it where someone came up and said, well, instead of taking something that we already know off of the record, would you like to start from square one and do it yourself? No one has, until very recently, has ever proposed such an idea. Yeah, it's one that really does interest me an awful lot, and I'm sure in 1986 it's going to. I probably will do it.
When you perceive music, or when you play this or record it or listen to other people's, do you have visual impressions as well?
Yes, I do. They're rather amorphous. I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly what they are, but yeah, I'm affected exactly the same way. I don't listen in a purely musical, in the traditional classical sense, shall we say, listening to the counterpoint of the winning voices. I don't. I can't. I have a very mediocre ear. I really do. And I like that idea. Thelonious Monk was a very mediocre piano player, but the compensation is so excellent. Great idea. Yes.
I wonder if you could speak a little on the studies of your rock.
Sure.
What were you preaching?
Well, that's a long topic. As Tony alluded earlier, I mean, he got on very well with all of the students, number one. So, I mean, there was a kind of, he had the kind of personality that was congenial. I mean, he's a nice guy to begin with, which is extremely helpful with any kind of situation. And I suppose in many respects, I was after that. I was after something that was rather alien to him. But on the other hand, there was never any pressure on his part for me to conform to his own prejudices. And I didn't ask him, as a student, to, I didn't demand his attention to certain, now let me put it another way, I didn't demand his liking a great number of things. And I think that's exactly what I would, it was a good lesson to learn. I have never done that with anybody. He's a superb teacher and a superb musician and a great craftsman. And it was very easy to learn a great deal. You would have to have worked overtime not to come away with a very enriching experience. That was a long time ago. Boy, I think back on those days. I had just gotten a job. What in the world was I doing there? No, forget it. I know it, yeah.
Well, I think that we've almost. That's a wonderful way to wind up with our guests this year. Very original and very inspiring. Thought-provoking. We'll see you all next.
Thanks.
Welcome.